Good morning. This is Richard Cheng of the Sativa Segment. Welcome to episode 23. Before we get started, I'd like to say a couple things. This is a wonderful new studio. I've never been in here. This is my first episode ever in this new studio. So thank you to Real News for providing this. I am without my co-host today, Dalton O'Neill. He is dealing with some medical issues, and he'll be back with us for the next episode. Before we get started, I'd like to just say that this episode is fueled by Ritter Spencer Cheng. It's a law firm here based in Addison, Texas, full service firm with an emphasis in healthcare and alternative substances. If you want to know more, go to ritterspencercheng.com. Well, we have a very wonderful guest today from Florida. He's also a client. I've known Aaron for a couple of years. Welcome to Texas, Aaron.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for being here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have you. So we haven't, we see each other maybe once every couple of years. I think the last time I saw you was at the Benzinga conference, right?
In Chicago, I think we bumped into each other. Sure.
But we worked together a couple times. And you guys are based, I believe, in Tampa, Florida.
Tampa, Florida is the headquarters.
Okay. So what brings you to Texas?
So I'm here to Texas, to be on your show.
Sure.
Happy to do that.
Yeah.
And there is a conference, Cannabis conference at Texas A&M that I'm here to present and to learn.
Okay. So I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. I've known you for a couple of years, but let's talk about your background and really how you got into the crazy world of medical cannabis and dealing with physicians and patients and everything else. So tell me about that.
So it's an interesting route. I started out, I'm an attorney.
Yep.
And I, for many years, was working in the long-term care senior housing field. Primarily, I was the general counsel for a skilled nursing facility company. We operated nursing homes. And so I dealt with all of the negative effects, all of the bad things. Whenever there was a bad outcome for one of our residents, whether it was a lawsuit, allegation of negligence leading to death, upset employees, and it was a tough job. And it was a tough industry. It's really hard to provide care to seniors. It's a very challenging thing to do. And did that for 10, 15 years. And then in Florida, actually in 2013, I got interested in cannabis. It was on the ballot in Florida in 2014 to amend our constitution to allow for medical cannabis, and it lost.
Okay.
But that sparked my interest. I was coming to Florida, so I started looking into it. And then fast forward 2 years later, it passed finally in 2016. And so we got involved in medical cannabis at that time. And friends of mine and doctors of mine were curious about it, and they ended up founding and starting DocMJ. And they came to me and said, we're going to start a medical practice to help patients in Florida who are eligible under the new law acquire medical cannabis legally. But of course, at that point, we had a constitutional amendment, but we didn't have the rules, we didn't have the legislative regulations. And so there was a lot of fear and a lot of doubt among doctors about what they could do. So they came to me and said, hey, you're an attorney, you're a healthcare attorney, can you help us? And so I got involved at the beginning with them as they were setting up their practice to try to help them navigate the unknown, both state and federal regulations, and how to promote their practice and how to do it in a really appropriate and compliant way. And that's really was the beginning of my journey. And it was always just a sort of side hustle. It was always something I was just doing to help out doctors I had worked with in the past in my nursing home world. And I just got more and more sucked into it. It was just a very interesting field and interesting time in Florida. And then what happened was, once we opened up the first dispensary in Florida, and it was opened up very near my office where I was working, and I could see firsthand the impact that medical cannabis was having on patients. And it was remarkable. In my daily work in the nursing home, it was mostly negative. It was mostly bad outcomes. You had these seniors who deserved great care and dignified care, but it was very challenging when you have a senior with multiple medical problems. How do you help them? And every solution that we had created other problems and side effects. And here was a medication that people were coming, they were using it, and when they would come back and there'd be a shortage, and they couldn't get it, they were crying. They were so upset. This was helping children, this was helping seniors, and it was just making such a positive difference in other people's lives. I'm looking at that and going, wow, this medical cannabis stuff is having such a positive influence and making such a difference in people's lives. It was so rewarding. And so I just started spending more and more time in that, and eventually was fortunate enough to transition into DocMJ full time as an owner and then as the CEO.
Wow, what a journey. And through, that story, I come to realize we have a couple things in common. First of all, we're both healthcare attorneys. Second of all, like you, I was general counsel of a large nursing home chain, and then somehow found my path into this cannabis world through physicians. Actually, that's how I fell into it. And it was around 2013 as well. Tell me about the discussions on how DocMJ, the idea of DocMJ, the genesis of that. Was it you and a couple of friends sitting around in a campfire in someone's living room? And who came up with the idea of saying, hey, listen, let's get physicians involved, and let's start embarking on this journey in cannabis in Florida, and maybe we can make money off of it.
Yeah. It was really a group of 2 or 3 physicians that I had worked with and knew well. And they just had a desire to help people in a responsible and appropriate way benefit from this medicine. And so they were just, bound and determined to create a practice that they were proud of, and a practice that was a real medical practice, really serving patients the right way. And so they set up they were practicing physicians and still are practicing physicians. And so they set it up like you would set up any other traditional medical practice. It looked and felt like just a different specialty.
Are they still working for DocMJ?
Some of them are. Okay. Yeah, some of them are, sure.
And they're actively seeing patients?
Oh yeah. And many of our original doctors from 2016 are still with us. I mean, our doctors love this practice. It is incredibly rewarding. And the really great thing about the culture is that you have doctors and staff who feel so good about what they're doing. I mean, we don't, when there was talk about shortage of staff and shortage of employees and difficulty getting people to work, we don't have any problem.
Yep.
Everybody wants to come work for us. Everybody wants to be in this industry because it's so rewarding. So the doctors that believe in it and love it, they're not going anywhere. I mean, some of them have retired from their primary practices and from their traditional practices, but they'll never give this up. It's just too wonderful. The response from the patients when they come back and tell you how many pharmaceutical and opioids they've given up, they talk to you about the improvement in their life. It's just so rewarding that nobody's going anywhere.
Wow. What different options we have nowadays for patients compared to like 10, 15 years ago, right? So tell me a little bit about DocMJ's services. It varies by state on the type of patients you can treat, because based off of the state's qualifying conditions, right? Tell me about some of the conditions that you commonly treat within DocMJ and the type of patients you usually see.
Yeah. So there are 3 common conditions that medical cannabis works really well for. The first is related to sleep insomnia. So it helps people who have trouble sleeping, which is a lot of people. The second most common is anxiety, depression, PTSD, any kind of psychological anxieties. Medical cannabis is very good for that, and a lot of people find that very helpful. The third is for pain. If you're in chronic pain, either due to an injury or just the infirmities of aging, it's a very good pain reliever. So those are the big 3 that we see patients for. It does vary by state, which is one of the challenges of running a multi-state medical cannabis practice, is that every state has its own regulations and its own rules. And so you have to either have practitioners who are both licensed in those states and willing and able to understand the differences, or you have to go and find different providers for each state.
So let's talk about that. Let's transition to that. Now, you guys are in Texas.
Correct. Yes.
And in fact, that's how you and I really started working together, and how DocMJ started working with me. Tell me about the practices here and how, your experience with, entering into Texas.
Yeah. So Texas, like every market, is different. And you and your firm were, of course, very helpful in helping us navigate the complicated regulatory issues. Because again, if we're going to do it, we want to do it right and do it compliantly. And so with your guidance, we got in here and found some doctors that we could partner with, some experienced physicians, and we did that. And it's been interesting. It's a good state and it's a good program. It has some from growing it needs to do
Sure.
to catch up to other states. They need to expand the conditions, they need to expand the products and the availability to the patient to really let as many people in Texas as possible benefit from cannabis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the amount of qualifying conditions we have in Texas. It's somewhat limited compared to other states, right? And we added PTSD a couple years ago, and hopefully we'll add more. But do you see DocMJ thriving in Texas? And how would your operations in Texas thrive more? What would that hinge on?
Sure. So we're in several different states, and so we have been able to watch all of the different states progress.
Yeah.
And they all progress similarly. They start like Texas did, very limited. Every state you go into, the legislatures say, okay, we'll allow it, but on a very limited basis because we're worried. What are we worried about? We're worried about children becoming addicted. We're worried about diversion. We're worried about traffic accidents. And so you sort of dip your toe as a state into it. Mm-hmm. And then after a certain amount of time, and it differs for each state, you realize that's not going to happen. Right. We're not going to have car accidents. Children are not going to grow up to become heroin addicts because we allowed medical cannabis. Right. And so you start expanding the program. And that's really what Texas needs to do. And I think it will do. It's just a matter of time. And I think what Texas will look like is a lot like the Florida progression. I mean, in Florida, we have about 880,000 patients on our registry right now.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. And it's a state of 20 million. So we're about 4%. Texas is a state of about 29 million people, so it's 50% larger, and there's probably 75,000 people on the registry. So there's a lot of people out there who could benefit from medical cannabis that have not yet entered the program. And that's the tragedy, but that's the opportunity. So I think once we see that loosen up, what I think the biggest driver of patients in Texas will be is availability of products. When it's easy to go down to the corner and purchase from a licensed dispensary, you'll see people get curious about it, both because they see it in their neighborhood and they can easily go purchase products, find what works for them, and that will spur the program. Because the best driver of patients in a state is successful patients. So when somebody gets into the program, finds a product that works for them, and it changes their life, they tell everybody. They tell their family, they tell their neighbors, they tell their coworkers. And when someone like you that you know and trust says to you, hey, hadn't slept well in 20 years. Last night, best night's sleep of my life. Your coworker, your friend, your cousin, your family member is going to go, well, if they're getting success from it and they're getting good night's sleep, maybe I should try it. And that's when your program goes from the 75,000 to the 700,000.
Yeah, ironically, in 2015, when the compassionate use program here in Texas was proposed and launched, it was estimated to be about 150,000 initially just from one qualifying condition. That never happened, right? So Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick, if you're listening to this, which I highly doubt you are, listen to what this guy is saying. I know when you first came into Texas and when we started helping you, there was something very different about Texas dealing with corporate practice of medicine that was different than Florida. What other states did you experience that in? Because my understanding is in Florida, for example, lay individuals can have ownership of physician practice. We don't have that here in Texas because of corporate practice of medicine laws. You and I had to work on a very specific model on how to successfully do that acquisition here in Texas. What other states have you seen that similar challenge?
Yeah. When we came to Texas, you helped me understand and learn the corporate practice of medicine concept, because being from Florida, we don't have that. So I own the medical practice in Florida, which is perfectly legal in Florida. It's not in Texas. So as you said, you set us up in Texas in a way that it's required. Then when we went into Massachusetts, they have a similar corporate practice of medicine. So what I learned in Texas certainly helped set up our practice in Massachusetts in a legally compliant way. So they have it as well.
With the different regulations and differences between, let's just say, Texas and Florida, do you see it impacting how you operate differently, or does it impact your bottom line financials at all, or it's about the same regardless of, if these regulations are in place or not?
I would say that every state is unique.
Okay.
Every state is different. So you have to evaluate every state and figure out what model works for you there. Yep. The major difference between Florida and other states is the requirement for in-person visits. So in Florida initially, and for the first 6.5 years of the program, every visit had to be in person in the same room with the physician. So what that meant was in a state as large as Florida, like Texas, you had to go, if you wanted to run a statewide practice, which we do, you had to go and open physical offices throughout the state of Florida. And that's a major difference in other states. So in Texas, patients are permitted to see their doctors conveniently through telemedicine, so you don't need all the real estate.
Okay, so I've been to Tampa before, and I see DocMJ signs everywhere. You know, you guys have a bunch of locations. Let's talk about the day-to-day operations of DocMJ. And I think I did a horrible job of really introducing what DocMJ actually does for the listeners out there. It's at the end of the day, DocMJ, you operate physician practices. That's essentially what you do.
Correct. We are a medical marijuana physician practice.
That's right. And your physicians are specialists in prescribing and or recommending. And I use that distinction because I don't like the word prescribing. However, according to Texas law, they actually use the word prescribing. So let's talk about that. Is that in Florida, a patient will walk in, they see that initial visit, you have real estate, you have a physical office, they see the physician, and the physician conducts a evaluation to determine whether or not the patient is eligible for medical cannabis based off of whatever their complaints are, right?
Correct. The physician will do an examination. They will determine whether or not they have a qualifying condition.
Yep.
They will determine whether or not they have any of the disqualifying conditions, which primarily is psychosis or pregnancy are disqualifying conditions, and they determine that the benefits of medical cannabis outweigh the risks. So if you have a qualifying condition and the benefits outweigh the risk, then by law, the doctor is eligible to recommend medical cannabis in Florida.
Okay, so if the disqualifying conditions, the potential risks outweigh the benefits, are they by law prohibited from prescribing at that point?
If the benefits don't
let's say if a patient comes in with with psychosis, that's a disqualifying condition, as you call it, right? The drawbacks or the risks of giving the patient medical cannabis, if the risks outweigh the benefits of it, are they mandated from or are they prohibited from then providing it?
Yes, that's not permitted.
Okay, so it is truly disqualifying.
Yes.
I don't. That's interesting. Not every state has disqualifying conditions.
Yeah, we would argue that just a standard of care would disqualify a physician from recommending a medicine to a patient where the risk outweigh the benefits. So
got it. Okay, so they see the patients, and as you said, most of the patients are in for sleep, for some type of other, pain levels or
anxiety.
Yeah. Or anxiety. And so what are some other conditions you guys commonly see beyond the big three?
Yeah. So cancer.
Okay.
Cancer is a common one and very effective for appetite stimulation. And there's some pain there too, usually. ALS, Crohn's disease, glaucoma are some of the other common ones.
Interesting thing about Florida is you have you said you had about 800,000 patients registered in the Florida program.
Correct.
And I've always said the physicians are kind of the gatekeepers of how a program grows within a state, because at the end of the day, the physicians are the ones who are saying patient one can benefit from cannabis, and they go and get it. You guys have a lot of dispensaries, right? You guys have a ton of dispensaries in Florida. So the access to care is very different than what it is here in Texas. We have two operating entities that they're vertically integrated to grow, manufacture, and retail, right? We just have two. How do you foresee Texas really growing if we only have two?
That's one of the biggest challenges. In Florida, when the dispensaries grew, and the number went from 10 to we're over 400 now, when you see the dispensaries in your neighborhood, and now in most neighborhoods in Florida, there's not just one, but there's lots of them. It normalizes it. It makes it seem less weird, less scary. And if you go into one, or if you walk by one and look in them, they're nice, they're clean, they look it's like someplace you'd be comfortable walking into. They're not drug dens. And so that increases the acceptance. And the bottom line is, when the public accepts this as medicine, then people feel comfortable coming to a DocMJ, coming to their doctor and asking about it and looking into it. So having dispensaries more readily available certainly increases a patient's willingness to try it. The other thing it does, just as a practical matter, it removes a barrier to getting the product.
Right.
Because I'm a new patient, I don't know what I want, so I have to try something. So if I can go down to the corner and buy it and try it tonight and it doesn't work for me, I can go back tomorrow and say, hey, that didn't work. Let me try something else. If it's a drive or I have to order it or I can only pick it up on Tuesdays, but I have to work on Tuesdays or I have to take the kids to soccer practice on Tuesdays, so I miss it. Now I got to go next Tuesday. Mm-hmm. The benefit is lost, the momentum is lost, and it's just too much of a challenge. So certainly expanding the availability for patients to see and purchase their product is a key ingredient of increasing the program and having more people access this medicine.
Right. And speaking of access, most of your patients are being seen by telemedicine, with the exception of the initial evaluation. And so how many patients are seen daily per office on average?
Per office? That's a great question. Well, the doctor can see a maximum, or we schedule a maximum of 4 per hour.
Okay.
So the maximum would be 32 in a day.
Got it. Okay. And are there any programs that you know of? Because I know you guys are beyond Texas and Florida. You guys are in Massachusetts. How many other states are you in?
There's 8 states total.
Okay. Within those 8 states, are you seeing any type of like private insurance or any third-party payers on a state program? Obviously not a federal healthcare program, but are you seeing any state programs that's being developed that offers any type of coverage for any of this stuff?
So no, I haven't seen any coverage anywhere for the physician practice. I have been contacted by companies and programs that are looking into and working on covering the product, the actual medicine.
Oh, you're kidding me.
So
wow.
I do know.
I would have thought the other way around.
Right. Yeah. I don't know why that is, but I know there are some insurance companies that are now offering, it's an additional rider to your insurance. So it's a buy-up plan. Okay. But I do know that there are some, and what they do is the ones I've seen, they put it as it's part of the bulk. So you get these 5 or 6 additional benefits for this extra premium per month. And that gives you X dollars towards the purchase of medical cannabis. And so that is in the works.
So I have to ask, and of course, this is kind of the hot topic in the world of cannabis right now. Let's talk about rescheduling. Let's deviate just a little bit. How do you foresee rescheduling impacting DocMJ? Rescheduling
will not impact us directly.
Okay.
The first and most immediate benefit, which I think we're already seeing, is acceptability. The biggest barrier we have in this industry is the initial reaction of people that cannabis is bad. Mm-hmm. Reefer madness, it's just for skateboard kids, it's just so people can get high. Mm-hmm. So as any time that the government or any entity says there's a medicinal benefit and a medical use for it, is helpful. It's helpful for changing perception. So now our politicians, instead of passing laws and talking about enforcement and talking about arresting people for cannabis, they're now talking about how to reschedule it so that we can make it a medicine. That's a good thing for the culture, and that's a good thing for public perception. So I think it'll be a positive.
Do you think do you think we'll see products in pharmacies, traditional pharmacies?
I think we're a long way from that. The bottom line is, to get to that, you have to have the clinical research. You have to have the double-blind studies. Somebody has to sponsor them. Somebody has to pay for them. And you have to have the results, and you have to go through the FDA. I think we're years off of that. Yeah. Someday, absolutely. I don't see any reason why not.
Yeah.
When? That's right. That's the big question. So are we going in that direction? Yes, very slowly.
Because DocMJ is in the business of, obviously, let's just call it for what it is. It's a physician practice, but you're essentially dealing with state legal products, but that's illegal on a federal level. What type of challenges, if any at all, has DocMJ either considered or faced, whether it be banking or because I know you guys operate separately. Your operations are kind of different in each state that's held by one common holding company. But if, let's just say, like in one state, the one operating company is not doing so well, and you're considering Chapter 11 bankruptcy, obviously there are some bankruptcy options that may not be afforded to you, or maybe it is. I'm not a bankruptcy expert. I'm just saying, what type of federal considerations has DocMJ either encountered or considered as you've been operating for the last however many years you've been operating?
It's interesting for me as an attorney. I'm running a business that daily is committing federal crimes.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's just.
I represent clients that's daily committing a federal crime.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting position to be in. There are a lot of challenges to running a federally illegal company. Banking is number one.
Yep.
So you have to find a bank that is able and willing to bank you. And so that was a challenge, less of a challenge today. There are a lot of state banks that have charters that will do that. They do charge additional fees, and they do have additional requirements because they want to make sure you're not committing crimes, and they want to make sure they're not going to get in trouble. So there are hurdles, but that's one that we're over. Merchant processors, so accepting credit cards can be a challenge. You've got to find somebody who's willing to do that. We even had an issue with, we text our patients, right? You make an appointment with your doctor texts you a patient reminder, you're due to come back to the doctor sends you a text saying, hey, don't forget to book your appointment to get your flu shot or any of your medical needs. We got shut down for that. Why? Because the texting goes over federal phone lines. So the phone companies don't want to carry text about a federally illegal product. So that was a hurdle to get through that. So all of a sudden your patients are used to getting texts from you about text reminders and fill out this form and hey, you're due back. And all of a sudden your patients say, hey, they think we dropped the ball. Why aren't you texting anymore?
Right.
Sorry, they shut us down and threatened to fine you. So that's a major hurdle. Even advertising. For a while, we couldn't advertise on TV. We couldn't advertise on radio.
Right.
Facebook, we used to end up in Facebook jail quite a bit.
Were you canceled?
We were canceled many, many times in Facebook. And then you start running ads in Facebook where you don't mention sort of the naughty words, marijuana, cannabis.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about green health and natural health.
Okay.
But the farther you get away from telling, advertising what you actually offer, the less effective your ads are, right? Imagine a car company advertising cars for sale, but don't use the word car or vehicle. It becomes much more challenging. So it's a difficult business.
Yeah, because I can imagine the consumers are then it creates a level of confusion of what you're actually offering, right? It's like, well, what are they really doing?
Right. And when you talk about credibility, you talk about being a real medical office, and you talk about real doctors practicing real medicine for real patients, but we can't use the word.
Right. Did you have any problems like raising money? Because I mean, DocMJ is a privately held company. It's not like you guys are public, but at some point I would imagine you did some form of round of fundraising. Getting investors involved, was that a challenge because of what you do?
It is a challenge. But again, it's a hurdle we've overcome. It's not so much a challenge finding the funding, it's more expensive. So the rates and the fees are much more expensive because the traditional lenders won't talk to you. So once you get into that secondary market, there's a premium. So you can, just like you can get banking, it's just more expensive. You can get funding, you just pay a premium for it.
Are you able to disclose what type of secondary funding you guys have considered?
So at this point, we don't need it. I mean, we haven't needed it for a long time.
Yep.
And even in the beginning, we sort of bootstrapped it. We cash flowed positively from day one because we were very careful about our spend. So we collect the fee when the patient books the appointment.
Okay.
Now, if you're not qualified, we give the money back. But when you're a cash business and your patient pays you at the time of booking, your cash flow is not an issue.
Got it. What are some of the responses with the traditional lenders? I'm just curious. When you approach the traditional lenders, what was their response? We just don't do it, or we just think it's too high risk? Because I know access to capital in this industry is very tough. I have clients that come to me about capital raising all the time, and rates in the last 2 years have been not so investment friendly, let's just say. Do you have any insight on that, and in terms of of raising capital in this industry?
Traditional lenders won't talk to you. I mean, if you go to a bank, if you go to an FDIC insured bank and say, I'd like to get a loan for my medical cannabis business, they close the door. They won't even have that conversation. Some of the regional banks will do it, but at very low amounts with personal guarantees and with collateral, which we don't really have. So that's closes that door. The only place to really raise money is in the private equity world, and even there, a lot of their LPs don't want to touch federal illegal businesses. So it's a subset of your private equity world, and it's just at a higher rate. And they just tell you it's such a risky business that it commands a high, and because there's less options, supply and demand, they can charge a higher rate. And as you mentioned, things like bankruptcy are not available to cannabis companies. There's some case law that some companies have gotten in there, but it's a very thin path.
Yeah, I mean, in the last couple of years, PEs have actually done pretty well with like developing funds for lending. In the last couple of years, I know that it was pretty active last year. But as you mentioned, PEs are their LPs have the limitations, whether they take they're tied to like a federal grant, or maybe there's like some type of morale clause in the partnership agreement that says we won't touch federal crime. So you have different limitations even with PE, right?
Yeah. And I think with the constant regulatory changes, it's very difficult for someone to model out how a company is going to perform in the long term. If a state adds more licensees, all of a sudden your business model changes. If the state goes rec, your model changes. If the federal government comes in and does something, your model changes. So how do you as an investor look at this and say, here's the growth over the next 1, 3, 5 years? It's very challenging.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Do you know of other companies that's similar to DocMJ or that uses like a similar model where it's under this one brand, but multiple locations, multiple states? Do you have competitors in this area?
We do. Sure. Yeah. There are other competitors. Most of them do it a little differently than we do, but certainly there are national brands.
Okay. I guess what makes DocMJ different than your competitors?
The difference between DocMJ is the way we were founded.
Okay.
We were founded by doctors who were doing this as a medical practice. We still have the culture and the look and feel of a doctor's office. My background as a healthcare regulatory attorney, it compels me at every aspect to look at how are we doing this that's legally compliant. So, like for example, we get calls almost every day, if not every week, certainly every week, where someone says, "Hey, a friend of mine went to this doctor and they give them money back for referral of their friend. Can you do that?" And I would love to do that. I would love to say to all my patients, "Hey, refer your friend because that's the best referral source, and we'll give you $10 off your next visit." That's a crime. So we don't do it. A lot of our competitors do, and I don't think it's because they want to be criminals. I think it's because a lot of people in this industry didn't come from the healthcare regulatory industry.
Sure,
they came from someplace else, either marketing or they were just cannabis enthusiasts, and so that's the difference. The difference is, we have real doctors who are now very experienced. We've been doing this for almost 8 years. We've seen over 400,000 patients. We understand the patients, we understand the regulations, and we understand the products. Because one of the challenges for patients is they need good advice from their doctors about what to purchase when they go to dispensaries to get the best benefit.
Yeah, I can really, as a healthcare attorney myself, anytime I hear the words, I'm giving something back in exchange for X, or there's some type of a bargain for exchange or quid pro quo, my antenna starts to raise, right? And I think, and that's the interesting thing about cannabis is that this industry collided and crossed over into what I have traditionally done in healthcare. And you're seeing, issues with distributors paying doctors, a certain commission for promoting their products. And depending on which state you're in, I know you're in Florida, it's a highly regulated state with certain laws. You have white co-marketing issues in certain other states. But I see more and more of that. I don't know if you dealt much with Stark law issues when you were practicing, but you even have other, certain states like California that if you read the laws, it actually uses the words like financial interest and how they define how physicians can't self-refer into his or her own, cannabis dispensary that they have a financial interest in. So it seems like the two worlds are kind of borrowing language from one another. So
there's no doubt. And there's the other interesting regulatory challenge that we face in every state is the relationship with the dispensaries.
Yeah.
We are naturally linked with them. Mm-hmm. Our patients have to go from us to a dispensary to get their medicine. Yeah. And we want them to go to good, reputable dispensaries and find products that give them relief they're seeking. Yep. And the dispensaries want them to come back to us, right, and us to continue to certify them so they can go back to the dispensaries and be patients and customers. And so that relationship is interesting because there's a natural synergy between us and the dispensaries, but there are also rules that we have to be very, very careful of.
I can imagine some of the marketing campaigns with the dispensaries, right? Mm-hmm. Just from a legality and compliance standpoint. What makes a dispensary, in your opinion, a good dispensary to use, or that you would rather work with versus a bad dispensary, right? Yeah. That you would maybe suggest to your patients to stay clear of?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any bad dispensaries, but the dispensaries we prefer are the ones that focus on medical products. And medical products, in my opinion, are ones that have clear CBD and THC ratios. Mm-hmm. The combination of the THC and CBD is very important for our patients, and it helps them regulate what products to use at what point in the day. And so the dispensaries that are focused on patients as opposed to the rec market, the other benefit is a dispensary that spends a lot of time and effort educating their staff. Because one of our challenges is when a doctor makes a recommendation, and in Texas, of course, it's a prescription, but we don't like it when they walk into a dispensary and the dispensary employee convinces the patient that they should try something different. A lot of our patients are first time, particularly in a state like Texas where you're still growing. Yep. And so they're either novice to cannabis, and certainly novice to the products that they're offered. So they walk in there and say, hey, I don't know what to buy. And a very well-meaning dispensary employee pushes them in the wrong direction. We have the elderly in Florida who end up getting products that are too high in THC. They have this, really uncomfortable psychoactive effect the first time, mm-hmm, and they swear it off. That's it. Okay. It didn't work for me. I don't like it. I'm never going back, which is so disappointing, right? Because they've gone through the effort to come to us. They've invested all this money in the state fees and our fees. And then their first experience was bad and they never want to touch it again. Okay. And that's disappointing. So I would say dispensaries that focus on the medicinal benefits and their advertising and their marketing is about that, as opposed to a dispensary that's looking towards the recreational market.
Got it. So let's talk about the 8 states you're in. You're in Florida, Massachusetts, Texas, and what are the 5 other states?
Georgia,
okay,
West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Massachusetts.
Okay. Out of those states, how many states actually have a physical medical marijuana card?
I believe 3 or 4 of them. Texas does not. Massachusetts does not. Yeah. But the rest, Georgia certainly does. Florida certainly does.
Okay. Yeah. And that was my point, is that being in Texas, we don't have that. So whenever I hear people talk about their marijuana card, it's kind of a novelty to me, and it's kind of like, well, we don't use that here. So what type of verifications, if any at all, do you guys usually use to verify that when a patient gets admitted, that they're an eligible patient?
Yeah. So we have a very robust and flexible EMR, electronic medical record system. Yep. So it's all online, and patients upload documents. And one of the documents we require is a driver's license or some proof of residency and proof of who you are. Most states, if not all, have a residency requirement. Mm-hmm. So you have to confirm, this is where I live, this is my driver's license, this is my utility bill. So we know who they are. In fact, when we first started, landlords would be very hesitant to rent to us. They didn't want to lease space because we don't want medical marijuana in our location. Yeah. And what I would explain to them is, one, we don't have any product. So nobody's smoking marijuana, nobody's using marijuana in our offices or around our office. We don't sell the product. 2, before a patient comes to us, they've given us their social security number, which we have to get to put them on the registry. They've given us their driver's license. They've given us their medical records and their medical condition, and they've paid us. So we're not even collecting payment at the office. We know everything about a patient before they walk through the door. We may be the safest tenant you have, because your grocery store next door, you don't know who's walking in and out of there.
Right.
And so it's the safest tenant in the world. Yeah. So we ask for all kinds of information, which we're required to by law in order to make it a seamless process for you to get on the state registry so you can purchase.
Yeah, I think that's it's probably just an indication of the stigma that's associated with the industry and some level of ignorance, depending on who your landlord is, right? Because we're in 2024, and I got into this 11 years ago. I mean, now granted, some of that has, like you said, it's normalized. It's been integrated and woven into the fabric of society now to where it's not so weird. But you still have some of those challenges, like you said. They just presume that that you're in cannabis, and they are somewhat reticent about renting to you. So hopefully that'll change. So tell me about what's the future for DocMJ? What are your plans for the next, say, 3 to 5 years, and any growth plans or any additional verticals that you may want to develop within the company?
We are always looking for additional ways to serve our patients and our patients' needs. So we added a few years ago, we added a mental health counseling product or service. And so we have counselors who are available through telemedicine to serve our patients. And that really came out of a clear need that the patients had. Patients come to us and you say, what's your qualifying condition? And they tell you PTSD. Why do you think you have PTSD? And they would tell our doctors some horrific trauma, whether it was a veteran or domestic violence or some childhood trauma. And the doctor would say, okay, clearly you have PTSD, you qualify. We'll be happy to give you the medical cannabis to treat your conditions, but you should probably have some counseling with that to address the underlying issues. And so we were looking for, a good quality place to refer them to, and we created our own. And so we have a mental health counseling service to refer our patients to if that's something they want. Some patients come to you and our doctors, can't confirm on their own if you have a qualifying condition or PTSD. So we have mental health counselors available to go through that with a patient to give them that diagnosis and see if they actually have it. And so that's been very helpful. And then we're always looking for science-based, reliable alternative medicines that will bring value to our patients suffering. We know who they are, we know what conditions they have, and we know that they are open to alternative medicines. So I'm constantly evaluating and looking for the next product and the next service that can provide relief to our patients.
Have you considered, I know your brand is DocMJ, so that's the brand. But have you considered, or would you consider, other alternative forms of medicine like ketamine or psychedelics or kratom, or people are selling amanita mushrooms in different forms? Is that something that DocMJ would consider or is looking into?
We have looked into it. I have talked to a number of companies and people that are doing those things, and we just haven't gotten to a place where we think that it's at a level where we're comfortable doing it on a big scale. But absolutely, we're certainly open to that. And as the science evolves and the evidence evolves, certainly, I mean, anything that we can feel comfortable with and that my doctors feel comfortable recommending or prescribing, we're open to. Sure.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because you're seeing all these different alternative forms of medicines that's addressing the opioid crisis that's being incorporated into traditional healthcare systems or traditional healthcare methods of treatment. And you guys have like the perfect platform to handle some of those alternative substances because you're already in it, right? So you already have the platform. That's why I ask. So as we wrap up, what do you see happening within the medical cannabis industry as it develops in the South? Because you go out west, you go out east, they're fairly more mature, but what do you see happening here in the South, particularly in, say, Florida, Texas, and surrounding states?
Yeah. It will continue to grow, and I think it will grow. There's no reason to believe that it will not progress in Texas, Georgia, Louisiana, like it has in every other state. As more and more people are experiencing medical cannabis and having positive experiences with cannabis, they will tell their friends. The stigmas will go away. Once you're into a program for 1, 3, 5, 6, 7 years, and none of the horribles have happened, and everybody knows somebody who's benefited from it, then you will get more and more acceptance, and the programs will grow. There's no doubt about it. So I think I see the program developing with more conditions, more products, more dispensaries, more locations, and more people. Most importantly, the bottom line is, and most importantly, more people finding better health and wellness through medical cannabis.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for making the time to come on the show. It's, again, I don't see enough of you. You're never in Texas. I caught you while you're here in Texas, and I'm really glad you made it. So
well, this has been a lot of fun from one lawyer to another. I appreciate everything that you and your firm are doing to help the industry in Texas and nationwide. And it's been a great getting to know you, and certainly enjoyed being on your show today. Thanks so much for having me.
Sounds good. Thank you, Aaron.